Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'm Barbara Kiernan. I'm chairing this committee tonight, and we've got a lot to cover in 60 minutes. So I want to get it going because, as I mentioned in my email, we all turn into pumpkins at 6 o'clock, right? That's as long as I let any kind of a committee meeting going. Otherwise, I have abandoned ship type things happening. So anyway, hi, Phil. So here we are. Before we get going, today we have two major things we want to do. First of all, I want to be able to listen to our two global grant aspirants as they talk about their advances and their progress toward their community assessment. And then we're going to have Christy tell us about the form. If there's time, I'm going to tell you about what's going on at the district conference. But right now, let's start. And I want to introduce it by having just a few more words on my part, because I wanted to make sure all of us are on the same page. And that is that the two aspirants we have tonight with us, Margaret Higgins from the Rotary Club of Tucson and Bud Eckert from Tubac, both of these people are preparing for a global grant. And one of the first steps in that process, it's an obligatory step, is that they do a community assessment. And that community assessment is actually something that Rotary International allows us to do, to listen to the voices of the people without us getting involved and saying, here's my project, what do you think of that? Or without you saying, I would like to do this, what do you think? What we're trying to do is listen, listen, listen. Like any grant, the global grant has its constraints, and there are a couple of things you cannot do with it. You can't build with it, for example. You can't put up bricks and mortars and walls. You can't support ongoing operations like salaries and electrical bills and rent. You can't actually put this money into the pockets of another organization like the Red Cross or World Vision, as worthy as their project might be. We need to carve out of it a very special added value piece that Rotarians are bringing to this effort. So that's what you can't do. But what you must do is you must do this community assessment. This isn't a needs assessment. It isn't a feasibility study. This is an opportunity for us to listen to all the stakeholders in the in that group. And I wanted to say that this whole idea of carving out a Rotary project may not appear initially in the community assessment. We are going to get that community assessment so that later as a team, we look at it and we make sure that we're taking into consideration all the hopes and vision and resources that our community provides us. So just having said that, I would like to step back now and tell you how today I'd like to go. For the first 15 minutes, I'd like to ask Bud if he would present his community assessment so far. And you've got 15 minutes, and I'm going to be timing us because otherwise we'll run out of time. And then at about, I want to say 5:20 or so, I'm going to have open the floor for a couple of questions. If you have additional questions, we'll follow up with them afterwards. Then Christy, at about 5:27 or 5:30 or so, I want you to talk to us about the form, which I have on my screen saved. And then we're going to repeat that process with Margaret, going for 15 minutes of presentation, 5 to 7 minutes of questions. Okay, so use whatever view you prefer, and let's go at it. So Bud, you've got the floor. I'm actually going to go ahead and look at you with my view so that I only see the speaker. That way you've got my full attention. Would everybody else please mute?
Okay, so you're ready for me, I guess. Everybody's muted, so I guess you're hearing me. Just raise your hand if you can hear me. All right. I'm sorry, looks like Tom Medic just got up from his nap. That was I sent everybody on the list today of our first draft of this thing. Does everybody get it and read it?
And didn't have time to read.
Okay, well, that's it's nuts and bolts of what we've been doing since January. So we've been very busy. We've got all our interviews in. Last weekend, we went down to Hermosillo and worked with I guess it's called the host club. But I don't know what else to say. Everybody's got the application in front of you. So are there any questions or?
Oh, but please do summarize for us. Summarize where you are and especially tell us the methodology. Tell us about the community you're going to serve, because there are people on here who you have not sent that to. So tell us about what is the community you're serving? Who are the stakeholders you interviewed? Who did the interviewing? What did they basically come away with so far?
Okay, we interviewed the doctors that had performed the cleft palate and rhinoplasty surgeries. We interviewed a child that had the surgery. We interviewed her mother. We interviewed the administrator of the hospital that makes the surgeries available. Who else did we interview? We interviewed
Laura.
St. Laura at the St. Andrew's Clinic, and we interviewed the Christian Surgeries group from Minnesota. We have all of the, we recorded and photographed all of the interviews, and we're trying to get some snippets out of there and drop them into our document. That's the last thing that we need to do before we finish it. I've already had some ideas of some things we should take out of it, but I'd like to have some suggestions of what else we need to add to it. So what else did you want, Barbara?
One of the things that Rotary is going to want to know about is your methodology. Who did the interviews? Over what period of time? Did you do them in what context? That type of thing. Like, did you use focus groups? Where did you interview them? That type of thing. So your methodology is going to be key for them to know how well you took this task of doing a community assessment and how did you approach it?
All right. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the last time we all met, I told you that we were blessed that the St. Andrew's Clinic was having their 50th anniversary at the Tubac Resort. And all the doctors from Minnesota and Ohio came. The hospital from Hermosillo came up. For St. Andrew's, some of the kids that have been had their operations, their parents. So we were blessed to have everybody in one place at one time. And our local high school, Rio Rico High School, lent us some really sophisticated equipment to do the interviews. Tom Maddock, one of our members who's very astute at this stuff, did the photographing. And Bill, who's on my committee, did the interviews and just did an excellent job.
You have your host group involved. In what way was your host Rotary group involved?
Oh, I forgot them. They came up on the bus from Hermosillo and did all of the interviews in Spanish. And I spent last weekend with them for a bit, and they're going to be a great partner in this project.
Bud, can you tell us, just from your memory, and perhaps one of your other group can, what was that child's like? What kinds of questions did you ask the child? And I'm curious about the kinds of questioning you asked. What was the nature of those questions?
All right. In the thing that I sent you, and I'm sorry you didn't have a chance to read it, but all the questions are in it, in the thing that we sent you.
Give us an example. Give me an example of what you might have asked the child.
Okay. You want the child? How are you feeling today? When did you realize you had a problem that other kids did not have? How did other kids treat you? Did you have many friends before surgery? How did you feel when you found out surgery might correct your problem? Before you had your surgery, were you afraid of what would happen? What was the best thing you remember about your experience at your surgery? Is your life any different today because you had your surgery? Anything more you want to tell us? Those are the questions we asked the children.
When you say children, how many?
We interviewed two kids. The one young man has been through a lot, and he's very outgoing, and it was really kind of fun. The other young lady, who's my favorite since I've been involved in this thing, was so camera shy that she wouldn't open up. So if that answers your question.
But who helped you develop the questions for these children? Who helped you?
Phil Silvers took me by the hand and gave us some tremendous questions.
That helps. And you can always go to their teachers and their nurses and doctors and each one of them. So for those of you who are thinking about global grants, doing questions, making them up so that you're not saying just yes, no answer questions. You want them to give you kind of open-ended responses. Thank you for sharing some of those questions. How did you all find the process? You and your club, what was it intimidating? How many, that type of thing?
Let Tom answer that.
Okay, Tom, will you unmute yourself?
Yes, all right, there we go. I have a new headset. Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I found the process fairly thorough. We interviewed each of the doctors who were different disciplines, plastic surgeons, pediatrician, cleft palate surgeons, orthodontists. Then we interviewed the executive director of the Christian's
Children's Surgery International.
children's surgeries, and the Spanish-speaking folks were the orthodontist, the chief of the SEMA hospital. So, and the children and the parents were all Spanish speakers. And Laura is bilingual, so I'm not sure how Bill interviewed her, English or Spanish, but I thought it was a comprehensive process. We got parts of Rio Rico involved, some of the Interact kids down there, and the students in the audiovisual arts. So it's been kind of a community effort.
Did you enjoy it? Was it something that you, in the end, came away with a feeling that you had learned things about that community that you might not have learned in other ways?
Yeah, I don't like to cry a lot, but after I heard several of the doctors
No, I don't mean cry.
After I've heard several of the doctors talk about the different stories about what happened, yeah, I felt pretty good about the path and the idea that we have and the project that we're trying to carve out.
Here's a question now. Having done these questions and gotten to know your community, which is broad. It isn't like going into a town and saying, oh, this is my town. I'm going to interview everybody here. It's more like a community that you put together because they were related to this surgical enterprise. And so it went all the way to Minnesota, did you say, where you were getting volunteer doctors, to the parents that lived. Did you hear some things coming out of that that you felt would help you as you move forward in developing this Rotary specific kind of wonderful added value that you are going to put together as a global grant? Did you get some ideas, some teasers, some interesting ideas?
Yeah, this particular birth defect impacts the students' sense of who they are. The kids get bullied. The kids are because of the deformity are pushed aside. The moms and the dads, these families, they're basically the last. When they get to this point, and to the people that we've talked to, that's the last opportunity that they have to be able to try and have a life. They have nutrition issues. The mother has, and the parents have economic issues. I mean, these surgeries and the way it works, they follow the child or the patient from the very, very first surgery all the way through speech therapy, orthodontia, and potentially even some psychological, depending on how old the child was and how badly they were pushed to the side of the road. So yeah, there's a lot of great ideas in here.
Ideas, economic kinds of ideas, social program type of ideas. One of the things that I told you, don't worry about covering in your final report, is how now does your project that you finally developed, that you haven't developed yet, right? Reflect those needs and those aspirations and those visions that people have. Can you give me an example of one idea that might have come out of this that said, this is the way I'd like to put together a global grant to help these people? Or is it too premature yet? Go ahead.
Jump in on that question. I think that what we learned out of the interviews is that I know at least I went in thinking that there was a cleft palate surgery and that was pretty much it, but it's not. There's years of follow-up and all sorts of things. Tom mentioned a few of the things, the speech intervention, there could be rhinoplasty, there could be further surgeries, but there's also psychological needs that are met. So I think what it'll help us structure is that it needs to be structured so it's more than just a cleft palate surgery. We need the sustainability of having these people coming back in, which they already do, following them through the whole well, at least through a few years of their journey and making sure that they get to where they are. Now, one of the neat things is that St. Andrews is already doing this. So what we're going to do is help them expand the program and get to even more people than they are already.
And expand their capacity. Perhaps when I spoke with Laura, she was saying that she'd love to do things like help them cover some of the expenses of coming in from their village to these clinics, but that she didn't have that in her budget. So that's another one of those, how do you make it affordable for parents to come? How can you work with the schools? Thank you very much. Is there anything else any of you want to say before we just open it up for questions? I'd like Bill. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'd like Bill to, I think there's a really unique piece to this one, and that's his relationship with the people in Hermosillo. Bill, can you give him some background on that?
Well, just briefly, because I know we're running out of time, but these are people that I've worked with. I lived in Hermosillo for 10 years, starting in 2001, and I was in the same club with them until 2011. Now, this is a new club that they formed, but the Rotarians, several of them have over 20 years experience as Rotarians. So they're not green. They know what they've gotten themselves into. So far, they have done everything that they have been required to do or that we have requested. And I have a very special relationship with several of the women in that club. It's almost an all-women's club. I'd say 18 women and 3 men at this point. We've got a fantastic partner there. They're going to help us every step of the way. Then they
What is their name? Bill, what is the name of your host club?
Oh, the club is Club Rotario Hermosillo del Sol.
Del Sol. Very
Yes.
good. I know I've heard of that club. It is amazing. In Mexico, you often have kind of men's club or women's club, and
Right.
the women's club, I hate to brag, but hey, they really get it going, don't they?
They
Well,
do.
thank you. All right, let me open it up now. I've got exactly about 5 more minutes. Phil, will you step up for a minute? You're the master of community assessments. Where are we in this particular one? Where are they? Where would you suggest they might continue to work on? What do you think? Go ahead.
I
Can
think
you
that this,
unmute? Thank you.
I did. I think that they did an exemplary job. It's a great example for other clubs. And the Rotary has been supporting out of club funds and a couple district grants, but going for a global grant is a lot of work, and they did a lot of work. And they learned some things, and they're now able to take it to a different level than they were able to afford through the voluntary contributions and district grants. The word spreads in Sonora and beyond, and there's a demand farther into Mexico. And so And they, even though the assistance they've received in the past has been very helpful, Laura always has a waiting list, and that's unfortunate. So uh, with a global grant that can be more than a year, she'll be able to sleep at night, and and they can reach the unserved children and serve them more immediately. So the community assessment has really demonstrated some things for all of us, and Bud and his team really did a great job.
Well, that's lots of wonderful words from the master. How about the rest of our committee? I see Michael came in. Did you get in, Michael? Anybody have any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I do. But is the district grant done then, since your needs assessment is completed?
Well, actually, it was news to me. I got a note today that we're supposed to have it done by the 1st of May. And I didn't know that. I could not find that in anywhere in the application. So no, we've got some bills and stuff, if that's what you're saying. That
Yeah.
I talked to Audrey this morning or this afternoon, and I'm going to send her a note where we are. But
Right, but your work is done. It's just a matter of pulling the bills together and sending that. You don't have any more to do in the assessment. That's my question.
There is one more thing aside from the assessment. I'm slated to go down to Puerto Penasco in the first week of May and pitch the project there at a friendship conference to try and drum up some money. And I've also already talked to the district governor, and they have agreed to put in District 4100 funds as well as club funds down there.
That is great. You know, one thing I just want to tell you, Bill, that is not part of the community assessment. That is your next step, where you're going to go ahead and put the project together. You're going to write it up in such a fashion that you're going to be able to go out and talk with clubs. And Christy is going to tell about the pledges cards, the pledges that people can make. So if those of you who are doing community assessment, don't worry, you don't have to go into the fundraising part. So as far as the community assessment goes, I hope that with your write-up of what you've done, be good at that methodology. Make sure you tell us how you did it. And we'll help you rewrite that if there's any editing to be done. But now you're ready to put in your final report. And the final report is on the website. It is on Club Runner. It's called, what's it called, Christy?
Individual project report.
Right. So go in there and you're going to actually use the format that's in there. It's a yes, no drop down menu, the favorite ways we do things. And you're going to fill out that report. Then you're going to actually upload the document that I sent you, which is the write-up of your community assessment. You're going to upload that as a document into your document section. And then you're going to put your receipts also up there as well. So I just want you to make sure that you don't get lost, that we do both of those things. One, you're going to write up the community assessment and you're going to be able to draw on that and use it when you actually write your grant, your global grant. But you also have to close out your district grant, which allowed you funds to do this. And that is under documents. No, project reports, individual project reports. We're going to change that name next time. But that's a real, you know, did you do this? Did you do that? Da, 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 da. Make sure you fill out all of that stuff.
where is it? Where is it? Where do I find this
It's
individual?
on Club Runner, just where your application was. It is your application. If you have any trouble accessing it, Audrey will help you get there, or I can. You just go on Club Runner, go to district grants, go to my district grants, and your club has got one, the one you wrote. And now
All
it's
right.
time for you to go along that line. You've done the application, you've done the budget. Now you're going to put some things in documents. And then at the final end, it says project reports. And that's where you're going to open it up and begin to fill in another kind of application, which is really a report, but it's not your community assessment. It's not going to look like what you're going to send to RI. Okay. Thank you so much. I am delighted. I'm sorry to rush you, but if you have any questions for these people, They are more than available afterwards. I think, Phil, you are also have been instrumental in helping them. So questions can go to Phil too, and Christy and me and whoever. And now I want to ask Christy if she would step up to the podium and tell us about this form that we've been working on. Christy, do you want me to share it on my screen?
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, well, I'll wait till you put it up.
It's up, it
Okay.
should be up now.
Okay, great. So last December, we changed the policy in the operations manual for our district that required the use of a commitment form so that clubs, instead of giving cash to a global grant, would instead give it to the annual fund, and our district would replace the cash with DDF. So that has been our district policy for years, but we've never really had a form. And so this form is actually for clubs that are not the sponsoring international partner, but we have a number of clubs in our district that support global grants that originate in other districts. Right now, we have 14 global grants that are either tagged, they've been funded, or they're pending an allocation of DDF. So this form isn't really germane to the two grants that we are proposing in our district from Tubac and Tucson. That form I wanted to work on. And when I started working on it and I looked at our district policy again, I paused, and I want to actually talk to our district leadership and the Rotary Foundation committee about making a temporary change, if need be, to the operations manual in view of RI's new policy of not banking DDF. Now, to clarify that, it's a little complicated, but RI passed a policy a couple of years ago where they did not want districts banking DDF and carrying it forward every year. Right now, our district has about $120,000 in DDF that is from 2020-21 that has not been used. So we have been carrying forward that DDF every year. And if we do not use that DDF on global grants in the next couple of years, then that money can no longer be used for global grants, but it'll go to the World Fund into a program that our district decides to put it into. So my pause at making this form for our two clubs to use when they get partners was the limiting nature of our policy right now. So our policy right now in the operations manual is that DDF will be allocated in the amount of 125% for the first $10,000 of club cash, and 100% of the second $10,000 of club cash. So the maximum amount of DDF that can go to one project is $20,000 of DDF. So we have, at the start of the year, on July 1st of 2024, our coming Rotary year, we'll have about $200,000 in DDF. That is DDF brought forward, and it's DDF that we get on July 1st, which is about $65,000. And we have about $10,000 going back from district grants that'll be put forward into global grants. So I hope this isn't confusing, but the bottom line is, before I make the form, I want to step back with our district leadership and look at all this DDF that we have and look at if we might want to raise that $20,000 maximum a little higher so that we can use more of our DDF, because hopefully we'll have a lot of clubs that will want to partner in on this global grant in our district.
You, Christy, we're running out of time, so I want to break in here and just tell you, though, that although the form may be revised and the numbers, this is the kind of information you're going to need to get. What we don't want you to do is have people tell you, I want to support this project, send you a check, and have you worry about that. So what we want you to do is know the district club, who's the contact, what are the name of the international partner? Well, in this case, we're talking about the Tubac Club or the RCOT. What's the host club? Well, we actually know those. What's the name of your project? Well, you haven't gotten those yet. But in other words, as we go down through this type of thing, this is the kind of information you're going to have. So hold off. We're going to get back to you with the final form. But one way or another, when clubs say to you, I'm interested, we want to say, good, thank you. Here is a form. Tell us how much you'd like to pledge. And when this grant is approved by RI, we will call on you to then send your money to the annual fund, hopefully, or someplace else. So I'm going to stop sharing this right now. Thank you very much, Christy. I appreciate it. I'm sorry to rush you, but it is now, believe it or not, 5:32. That is how close my timing is running. So now what I want to do is I would like to ask Margaret Higgins to step forward onto the podium and begin to tell us the same thing about your effort. I know your effort has been even more complicated. You couldn't just jump across the line. You and Elijah were working across continents and literally having to work through people that you did not have a chance to meet with. And so obviously a variety of different kinds of things can happen. But Margaret, are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
I am. I'm unmuted.
So go ahead
Yeah.
and you can see the kinds of questions that I asked Bud. If you would summarize your effort in the same way without me having necessarily to ask.
Okay, fine. Well, thanks very much for this opportunity. And Bud and your team, great effort in your draft for the community assessment. So thank you for that. It was well done. And I was very pleased to see that there were parallels in principle between what you've done and what we are doing. So number one thing is to say, I'm so pleased to be working with a solidly Rotary project. El Nadoya is a Rotarian with the Rotary Club of Tucson, and we're all working with the Dakar Rotary Club in Senegal. So it's a solid Rotary project. And what we're attempting to do is to build on and add value to what's already there in terms of a project or an activity that's called the Forgotten Children. So we looked at the Forgotten Children. We started to do a community assessment where we'd find out what the needs were as felt by the people in the town of Mabor, which is south of Dakar. And we quickly realized that we could actually add value to the whole project because it's not just about, as Bud and the others said, the cleft palates or the forgotten children. It can actually, it's ongoing, it's long-term, it's widespread. So we obviously had difficulties or differences because we had, we couldn't all just go over the border. We couldn't go to Senegal. So Dakar Club, in close conjunction with a consultant, drew up a combination of a community assessment and a bit of a feasibility assessment as well. But what we did was the characteristics of the community are Senegal is in West Africa. South of that, you've got many towns and areas that are very, very poor, and the children and the members, the population of the towns are living in a very subsistence way. So what we wanted to do was initially try and help the forgotten children. And then, as I say, there was a realization that it can be wider than that and developed, and we can add value. So the community serving is humanitarian aid to Mabor, and the needs were identified by the consultant that was working with the Dakar Club. He spoke to chiefs of villages, he spoke to professional farmers, he spoke to counsellors and educators, and he spoke to family members to find out what the locals felt was needed to not only help the forgotten children, but also to develop a community ranch, which would enhance and add value for the whole community. And it would also lead to increased sustainability. So I made notes. So the needs were identified. The discussions focused on, believe it or not, such basics as the quality of the soil in the area, the availability of labour and the cost of labour, drinking water issues, electricity supply, the difficulties encountered by the farmers. So what the farmers said was reported to the consultant, and in conjunction with the Dakar Rotary, they developed this report. The discussions were mainly in February and through March. So about 6 weeks of discussions. And it wasn't, unfortunately, just in one town. You had to go down through to Mabor and to the commune or the community there. Let me just see, local dignitaries, locals, farmers, educators, 300 heads of households were spoken to. I did smile when I heard that 2 children in Masillo were spoken to, and I thought, this poor bloke speaking to 300 people and above. But like the cleft palate, as I say, it's adding value to the surrounding neighbourhood. Many difficulties were reported, as I said, drinking water supply, professional farmers gave their input as to what was needed in terms of the ranch. The methodologies included the discussions with the 300 head of households. There was outreach communication, discussion groups were held by the consultant primarily with the locals in Mabor and nearby. Now, who will benefit directly from the project? I call it humanitarian aid. Project seems to minimize what we're trying to do or what they feel is needed and we're trying to help them with. So there's an unemployment amongst people, youth particularly. The anticipation and the need, as recognized by the locals, is education and training for such things as vocational work. So there'll be financial and social benefits to the entire communities. And the project, the humanitarian aid, comes under the rubric of economic development in the neighbourhood, well, in the commune, wider than a neighbourhood. So you've got farmers that will benefit, you've got families that will benefit from the ranch, which will be growing vegetables. So the locals will have vegetables. There's also an idea of setting up like a local supermarket, so that there'll be greater accessibility to the foods. Let me think. So unemployment will be fought against. Elderly will be benefiting from the foods that are produced in the local areas. There will be a redistribution of income, absolutely. So women will be empowered, and that is a focus of Rotary, as we all know. The wider local community will benefit from there being less homelessness. There'll be a more educated population. Low-income children clearly will benefit. And local businesses will benefit by having more educated and trained workforce. In all the conversations that were held, the farmers and the educators, they all agreed that the initiative they talked about, you know, the need for a ranch, the need for growing food, the need for developing a sustainable water system, they all recognize that this is what's needed. So that's where we are right now. And like the cleft palate organization, we also have a very, very strong connection with the Dakar Rotary, and with Senegal itself. We've got El as one of our Rotarians, and so he goes over to Senegal frequently. And Dakar also a value to us, they've had and have done several global grants, fantastic partners. So that's what we're trying to do. The structure that's there already, it acts as an infrastructure, and then the work that we'll build on and added value will sort of be tentacles going out from the current structure that's there. So that's where we are right now. And we've done a draft community assessment, and then we're getting together next week to refine it and present it to you all.
Thank you, Margaret. That's great. I wonder, you've got lots of time for questions. And I know for you didn't know exactly, as in, gee, the problem is cleft palate and follow-up, but you didn't exactly know how you wanted to, how you could help, or what the people felt would be of the most help. So you had a lot of questions to ask. You put forth some questions. I would like to once again ask Phil if you would start the conversation. It is now actually, we've got a good 15 minutes, and I think it's worth talking about this. So yes, Margaret.
I was wondering if perhaps Elle, who is closely connected as a Rotarian to the Rotary over there, if he'd like to take a few minutes to elaborate on what I said. He's been in much greater contact, because of language difficulties that I have, with the people in Dakar and with the consultant. So Elle, I'm not quite sure if you'd like to take a few minutes to augment what I said.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for giving us the opportunity to, talk and present. And Margaret, great job on summarizing what we've done so far. And the whole idea of us doing this when we initially started the process is two things that came to my mind is, how do we create something that will give us the sustainability that we're looking for, that continuation. But most of all is, like Barbara said, I didn't want to come in with the idea of, oh no, okay, this is what you need because I'm from that region. I know. No, I've been gone for that region for many years. So it was important for us to go and just basically ask a simple question. What do you need? We know the situation. What do you guys need as a community? And that's where all this information, all the people that the consultant interviewed, the consensus was just amazingly all the same. We need help, and we hope you can help us, because this is something that not only is going to impact the children, the women in the village, the youngsters that are fleeing the country, trying to migrate, just because they don't have anything to do. I mean, this is just something that's big beyond big, and it was a great thing for me to hear that from the locals, knowing that this is what they need, and it kind of aligns to what we thought that they were going to need. But again, it was important for us to hear from them. So it's been a lot of work, and the people there's been very pleased with the fact that we are thinking of doing something that we know will align with what they think is going to create a better future for the community in large, not just for the Forgotten Children Foundation, but it's that economic development that, for me, as we do this and future generations are coming, they can continue that same process, and it's just going to help and benefit the entire community.
Thanks, Elle, for speaking up.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now we've still got 5 minutes. So Phil, will you lead off with your question?
I've read the consultant's report, and it was entitled A Feasibility Study. And I didn't know it, but Rotarians were involved in it, but I couldn't tell that from reading the report. But Margaret has told me that Rotarians were involved. She also said that there were heads of households that were interviewed, but I didn't see that in the consultant's report. So there must be more to the community assessment that I haven't seen. And as you know, Rotary doesn't, and you already told us in your introduction that Rotary doesn't fund other organizations' projects. It has to be a Rotary project, and the community assessment helps that happen. So there is an organization overseeing the school already, and their interviews could be helpful. But so far, Margaret, I have not seen what the children had to say and what the parents had to say, or what the teachers had to say. So that must be a part of your community assessment that I have not yet seen.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We've asked for the actual words, as opposed to just knowing that 300 farmers were spoken to. Excuse me. And we've asked the consultant to provide us with some of their actual words. And it is solidly a Rotary project. This is particularly the community ranches, it's called, using, like the cleft palate people, are using the medical folk and the medical organizations that already exist in Mexico. This is using as a sort of jumping off point the infrastructure that's already there with the forgotten children, and it's spreading it wide. So yes, we will certainly get some of the comments from the parents might be hard. I'm sure he did speak to some, but keep in mind that many of the children are the forgotten children, and parents might be hard to acquire, but I'm sure the consultant spoke with some.
Sure. Now, many of you have heard this, but I have many examples of the need for a community assessment, which is not a needs assessment, not a feasibility study.
Correct. And
I'll give you one example from Nigeria, and an all-Indian Rotary group noticed that there were a lot of street kids on the street begging. And so they thought they would build a Rotary school, a Rotary wheel school, and they did, and they worked with the state education department. And the kids wouldn't come because they already had a vocation and they were making very good money at it by begging. And so that's one of many examples about how important it is to see the world the way the beneficiaries or potential beneficiaries see the world. And so I'm would welcome the opportunity to see the other part of the community assessment that gives us some insight. All right, thank you.
Yeah, terrific. And again, the feasibility assessment, I think that was somewhat of a misnomer, because when you read the actual report itself, it's more a community assessment. So that might have been a language translation, but we will certainly include and take to heart everything you've just said, Phil.
And one of the things, Margaret, that I can really add as a grant writer myself is the devil is in the detail. You'll get dinged on things that you haven't said, not so much on what you have. So tell us how, who, when, why. Be sure that you include the details and really think through this pie of who the stakeholders are. Make sure that you are addressing all of those, and go ahead and tell us ad nauseum if that's what it appears to you. But go ahead and tell us, because it's important that people know you've done your due diligence and you've spoken with a very broad swath of people. Okay, we still got 5 minutes. Anybody else have a question for Margaret, or a suggestion or comment? Okay, well, here's my question to you then. So you've talked broadly about humanitarian need, aid, but as you write this grant, you're going to write a pretty tightly, it will become a project. It won't just be money to women and money to this or that. It's going to be something like maybe developing a curriculum at the school that includes nutrition and, you know, agricultural science and includes et cetera, et cetera. Well, I mean, that's just off the top of my head, one possible thing that you could then build out. So did something along that line occur to you or to Elijah, out of what you heard, a need that could be addressed and created almost a model form so that it could be replicated perhaps, so that the villagers could see it? Whenever we diffuse aid broadly, it's going to be harder for you to write a grant, a really tight grant. Your tight grant is it. It's going to have a budget line item drawn to the specific needs. You're going to have, you know, it's very, very complicated. Please, I'm going to stop. Go ahead and tell me about what idea.
Well, I'm going to ask Elijah if he could respond to that. I certainly can respond in the
Absolutely.
general, but Elijah, as I know, has been working on these curricular issues already in detail.
Absolutely.
To
Great
date.
question, Barbara. So you look at the simple example of the ranch community that we want to do. We talked about all the women in the villages that are pretty much not doing anything. You look at us creating this ranch where now we teaching them how to farm. We're teaching them how to produce. We're teaching them what to do with that and the job creation that it will create. You look at the example of the young generation that due to lack of no resources and lack of jobs that they are trying to flee the country and immigrate or whatnot. Once this project is going to go for a couple of years, 3 years, whatnot. But once we develop that first platform of how things are going to roll, it's just now a matter of duplicating that in all the other villages that are around. So now we have a format of what's been done, and we can show that this is successful and this is been proven to work. Then we just need to go and duplicate that. That was the idea I had with the school when I decided to do that. Okay, we have how it works. We've done it. Now I can take this and even go to Nigeria if I wanted to and say, I'm going to implement something like this, just an example. So it's just the need is so great with, the women, for example, and the young generation and the education that these kids, need, that once we implement this, it's just a matter of now duplicating that to any other places actually that we want in Africa and not just Senegal.
Thank you very much. One of the things that caught my ear, and I wonder how many of you thought the same thing, was the idea of this grocery store coming out of growing the crops, teaching them how to do that. But, there's a great deal of what I would call financial literacy that I have found is not really available. We want to empower women, to give them, opportunities, and they are often the very people that can keep that inventory, learn to do the books, balance a budget, and it's a place where kids can intern and work. So it is also a part of that project, but think broadly about the specifics. And if you are thinking about doing like a curriculum that is going to be recognized in other places, you're going to want to start with a recognized model. And I don't know in Africa exactly where that is. I mean, you're not going to come to see how they do it in Iowa. That might help. But hey, we're really talking about something local. You're also needing to think about the ties to the local educational system. It may be that they've got their hands full and they're not interested, but those ties should be known and, if possible, cultivated, and talking with teachers and that type of thing. Anyway, I really appreciate your fleshing this out. Anybody else have a comment? There's so much to comment on. I feel as though now the idea is come and finish it. Same thing, you're going to want to write it up. We'll definitely be your readers. So send us and we'll take a look. Please don't in any way ever be offended when we send it back to you with suggestions. This is not going to be a red-lined English teacher thing. This is actual thoughts from the heart that are coming to you to say, we want you. Rotary is the only place I know of that wants you to get this money. Do you know how many grants I've applied for? In the whole default is no, NIH, DOE, you name it. I don't care. No, that's their money. But Rotary wants you to have this money, but we want you to be able to write for it in a very, very cogent, representative way. So if there aren't any other questions, I want to just really briefly end this meeting, and we've got literally just a couple of minutes, with something that's really important happening. And by the way, Margaret and Elijah and Bud, there is going to be a district conference in Sue's year. It's going to be in October the 18th and 19th. We're doing two things that I hope you will consider. One is there, and I know, Margaret, I know you're going to be flying on the other end of the world, but you're going to have representatives here. Anyway, we're going to have an international project fair that is going to be, it has received the blessing of the conference committee. We are really excited to have 15 to 20, 25 different international projects being exposed to the public, and we're going to have major speakers. We've got hey, Margaret, we've got Mr. Aussie, and Aussie doing the tweezer. Yeah, teaser. He's going to come. His name is Brian. Oh dear, I forget his last name. Beltran, something like that. Anyway, he's supposed to be wonderful. And so that is one thing that I hope you will plan on having a table. The second thing is I would really invite you to take this opportunity to do a presentation with your full grant, if you can, like you're going to do down in Mexico. We're going to be down in Mexico, and 2 weeks after that, hopefully the grant will all be written. We're now going to be closing out the funding. You'll say to the people down there, and I only need 20,000 more, and all those people are going to come rushing up and say, here, now you got it. So this is a good place to practice. So I would like to, Sue Archibald invited me to invite you to consider being one of those breakout sessions, either independently, or we could put the two of you together again and give you a half an hour each. That'll be kind of like what you have in Veracruz to do, or what is it, Jalapa. Anyway, so that's one thing. And so number two, this committee that we have formed is really got people from Yuma, and it's got people from the I-19 corridor. It has people from, obviously, Tucson. Pat Patton is going to head it up and make sure it happens. And we are looking right now, as our first step, is to find out what projects are out there. We want projects that are done by Rotary clubs. So right now, Margaret, you've already got one from our Rotary Club. Wilcox is working with someplace in Russia. Casa Grande with the Philippines. I bet none of you knew that. Well, they're going to be on our list of people to get to this conference. So I'm looking for 20, 30 projects. Now, it can also be Hands Across the Border, or Absorbo, or whatever we want to do in Mexico, a standalone. Sure can be. And we're going to have opportunities for people to ask them questions, make donations, as in pledges, talk with them. I'm sure Phil is going to be right there. Tim Dugan is going to be there signing us up for the very next trip down to that area. So there's lots going on. So right now, I just wanted to let you know we've got 1 minute. That's happening. We're so excited. We are going to have another meeting in May to close out this year. We will not be meeting over the summer. Everybody's going to go hither and yon, and now you get to rest too. But I want to tell you how much we appreciate all of you taking the time to do this. And by the way, Margaret and Bud, Eugene Medina, who is part of our cadre, who is a very, very knowledgeable person in the international sphere. He has offered to be your personal private, I don't want to say slave, let's say mentor, to go right along with you and to be that reader, to be that bouncer of ideas against him. His experience will help. Just remember, as you go forward, don't be building buildings. Go ahead and build capacity. You can build the capacity of an organization without having to build it in another room. And forget about operations. You can put stipends into training. Probably one of the best things you can do for sustainability is train people to be there when you're not. But you can't pay salaries per se. And so it's really stringent. There are rules to this game. And that's what Christy and I can help you do, is make sure, and Phil and all of us can help you make sure that you go in with the strongest application possible. So has anybody turned into a pumpkin yet? Nope, not yet, but I have a feeling you're gonna. So any last words for the good of the cause? Okay, then I'm going to end this meeting. Thank you all for coming, and congratulations, Margaret and Bud. You guys have been working overtime. I can't wait to see the write-up. And thank you, Christy. All of you. Adios. Nos vemos, pues.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Good job, Barbara.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you
Oh.
very much for coming in and really kind of I think your remarks were right on. They were very encouraging, and I think that when we see this as a first effort, we are going to see what you expect out of a first effort, which is going to be things that needed to be added on, and we've got time to do it. So thank you for being available. You've been a remarkable help to all of us. So have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.